last week asked Nigerians for 7 days to resolve the crisis. I'm now joined by his spokesperson, Ajuri Ngelale. Ajuri, thanks so much for speaking to Eye on Africa. So first of all, why did Muhammadu Buhari consent to this cash swap in the first place? Why take a risk like this so close to such a crucial event like an election?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Firstly, let's appreciate the fact that President Muhammadu Buhari is known around the world for his unimpeachable integrity and for his stance on issues around anti-corruption. This currency swap was really motivated by laudable objectives, including undermining the role of cash, the illicit role of cash in our electoral processes with instances of vote buying in past elections, as well as undermining the role of cash in things like terror financing and the like. This really motivated it. Unfortunately, however, we had a situation in which officials of the nation's central bank proved to be totally incompetent and borderline conspiratorial against the electoral process in how they have implemented what is a laudable policy. We have seen a situation in which the new Naira notes that were to be produced were produced essentially at about 10% rate of what the old Naira notes, of 10% of the quantum of the old Naira notes that were removed. Only 10% of that quantum was replaced with new Naira notes, leading to the scarcity we now have. This was not what was pitched to the president by the governor of the central bank, Godwin Emefiele. The president was deceived into believing that there would be adequate supply of the new Naira notes at the inception of the policy implementation period. That did not happen, and as a result, we now have this crisis. But as you mentioned in your intro, the Supreme Court of Nigeria has stepped in, and there has been at least a temporary cessation of the policy.
So to be clear, Ajuri, you're saying that this was an engineered situation by the head of the central bank to undermine the ruling party's chances in the upcoming election. How so? How is it going to work like that?
Well, we believe the proof is in the pudding. The governor of the central bank was recently a political partisan moving toward a run at the presidential nomination of the same ruling party that is now being undercut by the failed implementation by bureaucrats at the central bank. We believe that the trail of deception and some of the other elements of this unfortunate process that I've alluded to all point back to some level of conspiracy between political actors and bureaucrats at the central bank. It is worth noting that the main opposition candidate in the election, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, former vice president, was one of the loud voices calling for a continuation of the suffering of Nigerians, asking that the deadline not be moved, and that if Nigerians cannot access their funds in the banks, if Nigerians are hungry, if Nigerians are going to lose their life savings, it simply doesn't matter because the deadline should not be moved.
But Ajuri, regardless of the politicization of this, at the end of the day, Nigerians are they're the ones living through the disruption at the moment. And it's not just the disruption that they're seeing at the moment. It's not just about the currency crisis. They're seeing long queues at the polls. There's a lot of concern about, there've been 2 recessions that Nigeria has seen since 2016. Do you think that what may also undermine Nigerians' faith in the establishment is Buhari's record itself?
Oh, absolutely not. Nigerians are very intelligent people. They recognize that, like you said, there have been 2 economic recessions. And don't forget, the major one is a once-in-a-century global pandemic that cut the nation's revenues by 60%. Of course, Nigerians recognize that we've seen rising inflation and rising interest rates around the world. It's not just a Nigerian situation. But they also recognize that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has made unprecedented interventions with 5 new international airports, 3 new high-speed rail lines, roads and bridges across the country, and power plants as well. So progress has been made. But I want to say very quickly that this election, ultimately, with the cessation of the Naira redesign policy, at least temporarily by the order of the Supreme Court, Nigerians are going to base their vote not on this conspiracy that failed. they're going to base their vote on the fact that our candidate is a credible former governor of Lagos State who turned around Lagos State and who is pledging to establish a national consumer credit system that will allow Nigerians for the first time ever to own their own cars.
But Ajuri,
and
has the
homes.
damage not already been done? We've seen the level of frustration that Nigerians are suffering through. How do you come back from that?
Well, they understand who is calling for the continuation of that suffering and who has come out to defend them in the midst of the suffering. Our candidate was the first presidential candidate to come out and talk about the failed implementation by the Central Bank of Nigeria of this policy and the need for it to be resolved and fixed instead of continuing to pretend that our people are not suffering as a result. It's the opposition candidates that supported the Central Bank of Nigeria at a time when Nigerians were suffering from the policy, which we find totally suspicious. So if you're asking the question...
Ajuri, I'm so sorry, but we really do appreciate the time that you have taken to speak to us, but that is all that we have for the moment. So Ajuri Ngelale, they're the presidential spokesman for Nigeria's leader, Muhammadu Buhari. Thanks very much for speaking to us.